Hey everyone, welcome on in. My name is Matt Cryptic if you would prefer, and today is a day that I'm excited for because about a week ago I asked my Instagram what they wanted to see. What kind of tutorial did they want to see? They voted, we chose a beginning modeling tutorial, and then I asked them what they wanted to model, and they chose. And this week, we're starting our tutorial series, a brand new series based on just getting started in Maya with hard surface modeling. And we're going to be modeling a fan. So if you voted in this series and you're excited for this tutorial, get ready because we're going to go into the full process of building, UVing, and texturing a fan from Maya to Substance Painter and finishing it off with rendering in Arnold. Any files that are required for this tutorial are in the description of this video. If you have any questions or concerns, leave me a comment. I do my best to answer every single one of them, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And without further ado, let's jump into this new series. Okay, so we should be starting off with a blank canvas in Maya. We should have nothing else in there. There should be no pre-existing project files. We're starting brand new and fresh. The first thing you're going to want to do is set your project. Setting your project is important because as you go throughout this process, you're going to be saving concept art, you're going to be saving different texture files, and you want to keep everything organized and nice and clean. So we're going to go up here to File. We're going to go to Project, Window. And here you have your default project. This is default locally saved on your disk drive, your C drive. We're going to change this. We're going to hit new project. We're going to title this Fan. And then we're going to change the location that it's saving in. You can put it wherever you want to. If you don't have an external drive like I do, put it wherever you need to. I, however, have my own little project folder here. And then I'm just going to select this fan tutorial folder that I created offline and hit select and then accept. That's going to create a new project folder. So now if we go in here and go to fan tutorial, go to fan, we have our project directory. This is where everything is going to be stored. Your scenes, your scripts, anything you need is all going to live in here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to copy some stuff to it. So I'm going to minimize Maya. We have our reference folder. These are the 4 images I was able to find for this specific fan. You're going to take your reference images, we're going to copy them. We're going to go here to our actual folder where we're saving everything, our folder structure. We're going to go to source images. In source images, we're going to paste these, and then this is going to be how Maya knows where to look for your source images. Okay, so you're in Maya. Hopefully at this point you have a little bit of experience with moving objects around in 3D. If not, I will have a basic tutorial coming out soon with navigating in 3D and working in Maya. But at this point, we're hoping that you would at least have a little bit of experience inside the application. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to File, Save Scene As. And if you notice up here, this should be where you're linking to. So wherever you saved that file is where you should be saving your scene to. So we're just going to call this Fan Blocking. If you're familiar with my other tutorials, I enjoy creating multiple stages of saves, just because it gives me a backup in case I need to go pull apart. Okay, so we've got our viewport. We're open here. First thing we're going to do is get our image into Maya. This is what we're going to reference off of, and this is what we're going to work off of. And we need to decide how we want to do this. There's 2 ways of doing this. You can pull it into Maya as a reference image plane, or you can, if you have a secondary monitor, just open them up on your secondary screen. I like doing both. So we're going to go over here. We're going to go to Create. We're going to go Free Image Plane. And I'm just going to scale it up a little bit and move it up above the grid. We'll sync it right about there. Okay. And then with that selected, you're going to hit your attribute editor. Once you pull up your attribute editor, you can then change what you're going to apply to this. We're going to image name, and we're going to choose which one of these we want to use as our reference. This one, to me, is the best image because it doesn't have anything on it. It shows pretty much anything you need. And again, these are the ones that are here for your reference just in case. So we're going to open up the Copper Fan made by Holmes. And this is obviously not sponsored unless Holmes wants to sponsor a 3D artist for some reason. Okay, so with that, you've got your image plane created. We're good to go. We're ready to start actually modeling. When you're looking at a model like this, the question becomes, where do I start? Usually what I will do is I will start from the bottom up. So in this case, we're going to just do that. We're going to go ahead and create a primitive polygon. We're going to use R to open up our scale tool. We're going to scale it down in the Y direction, and then we're going to scale it out in all directions. We're going to just keep doing that until we have a nice baseline for what we want our fan to be. And there we go. So we have that. We're good to go. Now, there is a problem here, and the problem is inherently with the way that Maya creates its primitives. Right now, this is one massive multi-point polygon. We don't want that. We want to avoid that as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click. We're going to select face. I'm going to drag in the center here. And you're going to notice that selects both faces, or both sides of the object. We're going to then go up here to our modeling toolkit. And in here, if you haven't used this tool before, are all of your basic modeling tools. They're also available up here. You have two ways of accessing most of these tools, as well as any of the drop downs up here you may need. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit extrude. And we're not actually going to extrude, we're going to pull it inwards. So we're going to pull these faces in and create this new polygon. This gives us a ring around the object, and we're going to delete that centerpiece. Now we have our polygon. We have a hole in it though. We don't want to leave this, but we still want to keep with the quad-based workflow. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to one of these edges, and you want to try to keep this as like symmetrical as possible. So we're going to go click, 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 and just select all of these. And then we're going to do bridge. The bridge tool is available in both areas. We're going to do a single bridge. Sometimes your bridge will add a division. Sometimes it won't. You can just click and drag on this divisions, and you can add or increase the divisions that you have present on that bridge. So you'll notice that creates a nice quad that we can work with. We're going to take this vertex, and we're going to hit the merge button. Again, it does not matter which side that you work in, as long as you know where the tool exists. All right, we're going to merge those, and then I'll just usually come in here and scale it out just a tad bit to retain that circular look. And you can reference this by hitting spacebar, which will open up your 4-pane view, and then hovering over whichever pane you want to view, and then hit spacebar. You'll notice that you see it as a shaded in some cases. You can just turn off shading, and then you can link these up, and then those will become your base point. That way you can still continue holding this circular pattern. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on the bottom. Just remember to select all your edges. When you're bridging, when you hit bridge, you're looking to make sure that you're continuing to have just a quad up here. Right now, it's just a triangle. As soon as you add a division, now it's a quad. So really your workflow should be focusing on making sure that any of the adjustments that you're making still result in a quad. In some cases, you can't avoid it, and that's okay. Just do your best to maintain the actual quads themselves. That way you don't get kind of messed up in the long run with a bunch of n-gons or a bunch of triangles. Okay, so we have this. We're good. We have successfully quadded out a cylinder, and now we can actually start to work off of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this first face here. So we're going to select this face. You can hold shift and click, 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 click. That's just kind of a pain. So what I like to do is I hold shift, or I click and then hold tab and then click and drag. And that will select the faces that you were highlighting. So what we're going to do is we're going to do one more extrude. So you may notice that when you hit extrude, your controller right here is off to one edge. And if you scale that, it's going to do something funky. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the world switch. We're going to switch from local to world. So we're going to switch to that, and you're going to hit your scale again. And we're just going to pull it in until we have about what we need, which I'm thinking right about there in the center should be fine. And then we're going to hit extrude one more time. Same thing, pull it up. Now, we've got our basic base, but there's some detail here that we're missing. So the question becomes, how do we add this detail? So there's a lip that goes around the bottom of this. And it's a little hard to tell how they actually built this, so we're going to kind of guesstimate it. But what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Mesh Tools. We're going to do Insert Edge Loop. This is how you're going to drag an edge loop that goes fully across your model. This is a lot like the split tool, except it's kind of automated. So we'll drag this here. And then here's what we're going to do. To exit the tool, hit Q and escape. That's going to quit out of the tool. That way you're not selecting anything anymore. It does really actually start to... it will become a nuisance as you're working if you forget to do that, because then you'll be dragging edge loops everywhere and you'll just have to undo work. And sometimes that can cause Maya to crash. So just be careful with that workflow. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to click this edge, and then you can shift double click the edge next to it, or the face next to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this face, and then you can shift double click the face next to it. From here, what you can do, you can hit your extrude tool, and we're going to go and extrude outward from over in this area. We're going to extrude outward. That's one thing to note. Pay attention to where your handles are pointing, because sometimes you'll be pointing in a different direction. It won't really make sense, but when you pull, you'll notice something funky. And so we're going to leave this little gap here, just a tiny one. And then we're going to do one more extrude. Same thing, except we're going to go out a little bit longer. And then we're going to do one more extrude here. And we're going to extrude this up. This is going to give us that nice little divot. And there's the base of our model. Now, one thing to note is when we smooth this, it's going to look kind of like garbage. This is going to be an important step later where we come back through and we support this. And to smooth, all I'm doing is hitting 1, 2, or 3. 2 is kind of an in-between, shows you the wire mesh and the smooth. 3 is a full smooth, and this is your preview mode for how your model is going to look smoothed out. What we'll do when we come back is we'll be adding what are called supporting edge loops. But in the meantime, what we do want to do is just add a little bit more general shaping to this because it's very basic. So we're going to select, we're going to again right click, go to edge, select the entire edge, and you can select edges by just double clicking and it'll select the entire loop. And then we're going to bevel it. So to use the bevel tool, all you got to do is click it, and then you can go up here and you can adjust your fraction, your segments, your depth, anything you need to. We're only going to be playing with fraction, and we're just going to do a very basic bevel right there. We're going to do the same thing down here. And you can do both sides at the same time, which is a nice feature. Cool. All right, there we have it. And you'll notice too that when you do bevel, it does add some support to it. So it does allow you to kind of avoid adding more support in the future to keep your polygons lower. When we're modeling, we're trying to think of how this would function in real life and how to best represent that. And when it comes down to certain things, I like to add certain details that maybe won't be entirely necessary, but it does help to kind of think in this way, because when you're thinking of like how an object would actually move or interact in the real world, this is how it would work. So what we're going to do is we're going to select these top faces. Again, you're just going to right click, hit face, select all your faces, and there you go. We're going to extrude, change your world snap, and then pull this to the center. And this is going to be a relatively small hole, and we're going to hit G to repeat the tool, and then just pull this down. This is just going to create that screw hole that doesn't necessarily need to exist, but it's a detail that I like to add. So now what we're going to do is look at the kind of the arm, the holder of the fan. It's this cylindrical half moon shape, but it also has these tabs on the side. And so what we can do is we can actually pull up our reference folder. We can kind of see how this works. So we'll go... I like to do this just because, again, this is going to be a higher resolution image that you can look at. Maya's viewport rendering is not the best when it comes to this. So we notice that it is this half moon shape. It's got this little tab right here. This tab looks like it's to stop the fan from rotating all the way around. And this looks like some sort of guide arm or hammer or something. I'm not really sure what that is, but we could see what we want to do. So the question is how do we want to build this shape? The easiest way to build this shape is going to be to use another cylinder. So we're going to build a cylinder. We're going to bring this up. We're going to rotate this 90 degrees in the X direction. That way it kind of lines up here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to scale this up. We're going to scale it in. And we're just trying to kind of make this fit what the image looks like. Okay. So normally what we would do is we would quad this out, but we're going to actually skip that step because we don't need to. So what we're going to do is we're going to extrude. The same process, really. We're going to pull it in ever so slightly. And then we're going to hit G again to repeat the tool. And we're going to pull it in. Sometimes you'll notice that it will switch direction on you like this. Don't worry, just drag the other way. And we're going to drag about midway through until you see it hit black, and then pull it out a little bit, and then delete it. So now we have a perfect ring. It's quadded out. We're going to select the interior of this ring, and we're going to merge it. You can hit your merge tool, and you're going to notice it doesn't do anything. Sometimes you'll need to increase the tolerance. So increase tolerance to 1. It looks like you can do that one a little bit earlier. It just depends on when it's actually going to snap together. And then I like to just do a 1/, because sometimes it misses something. And then to match this, we're going to add an edge loop on the outside just to kind of match the inside with the outside. Okay, so we have our ring. We're looking pretty good. And then we're going to delete the top of this. That ring doesn't matter anymore, because what we need is this bottom half moon shape. So that leaves us with holes. With these holes, what we're going to do is we're going to actually select. We're going to go edge, 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 edge. And we're going to bridge. This is the bridge tool. The bridge tool is used for closing off faces that maybe you deleted by accident, or if you need to do some manual modeling, bridging is a great way of doing that. Most of the time in Maya, the bridge tool will automatically seal everything together. And you can see in this case, it did. Sometimes it won't, and that's okay. Just make sure, and if you do have any loops that are open or a face that isn't connecting properly, you'll just go through and you'll select your vertices and you'll just merge them together just to make sure. But it's just something, again, check, make sure. Okay, so we have the bottom ring of our fan. Now, the only thing that we do have an issue with is it kind of flattens out at the bottom here. So what I want to do, we're going to go to Mesh Tools, and we're going to go to Offset Edge Loop Tool. What this does is creates an identical edge loop on either side. We're going to pull it right to about the middle here. Q Escape to leave that tool, and then double click both of these. We're going to pull this down ever so slightly so it flattens out, and that's going to be where that screw attaches, what holds this together. And we're going to worry about the screw details last because they don't really matter at this moment. So where this now sits, what we're going to do is we're going to add the small tabs that stick up from the back. Thankfully, these are pretty basic, so all of these shapes are pretty easy to work with. So all we're going to do is click those two faces, hit extrude, drag them up, and it does kind of do like a taper. So we're just going to retain that taper and then pull it back a little bit. Now we have our ring. And this is going to be the same issue when you look at it. If you smooth it, it's going to look kind of funky until we add those supporting edge loops. Not something you really need to worry about right now. Okay, so now this is where we start getting to the more complex part of the fan. We're going to be looking at the fan body. There's still a lot of stuff here that needs to be modeled, but we're not going to worry about that just yet because it's not necessarily important right now. What is important is we need to figure out this barrel. So this model is challenging because the barrel itself of the fan has a bunch of holes in it. It has a lot of holes in it. And this is something we're going to accomplish by using what's called the duplicate special tool. But initially what we're doing is we're going to block this out so we have something to work with so we can finish up the rest of the model and then work on the more complex components of it. So we're going to do what we've been doing and we're going to create another cylinder. Fans themselves are pretty much cylindrical shapes, so they're easier to work with. So what we're going to do is go to your rotate X, hit 90, and that should be hopefully kind of centered. It's probably not, but that's all right. We'll adjust for it. And then we're going to adjust for what would be the base of the fan. So we kind of want our fan to be about, let's say about that thick. Yeah, that seems about right to me. Now we are going to do something a little bit different here. This is where we're going to get into a weird area because what we want to do is we want to accomplish this pattern that we have going around the fan. But we need to pre-think about this pattern. So we need to know basically how many of these are there. And so the easiest way to do that is going to be to sit and just count them. What I will do is probably just establish. So what I'm going to say is each one of these is going to be a face on my object. So starting from the top, we have 1, 2, 3. So we're going to say that one side has about 30 of them. Currently, our cylinder does not have 30 faces on it. So this is where it's going to get a little tricky. So over here in our channel box, what we're going to do is we're going to hit this poly cylinder. This is going to allow us to adjust our subdivisions. This is something you need to do when you initially create the model. Sometimes you can do a little bit of scaling before Maya stops allowing you to use it, but we're going to adjust the subdivision axis. And you can click and drag. You can also type in a number. So what we're doing is we're looking for 30 from the center. So we're going to go with this as our center. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so you may notice here, this is also something you want to watch out for. we've lost our center point. So because Maya tends to keep this as like an odd number, we want to make sure that we stick to an odd number. We're going to make that 56 because we want to make sure that we're maintaining the center point. So now let's look at this. We go 1, 2. So we're going to stick with 28. We could push that a little further if we wanted to, but we're going to get the same design out of it. So it's really not the end of the world. If you want to figure out how many the fan exactly has, go ahead, do it. But for this tutorial, we're going to stick with 28. And remember, all I did was increase the subdivisions to 56. Okay, so we're going to follow that same workflow. We're going to take all of this interior. We're going to go ahead and extrude it in. We're going to hit the scale and then just scale it in. This is a pretty thin part. So what we're going to do is we're going to scale it as such. And then we're going to do another G, pull it in, and then hit delete. And then we're going to merge. And it's that same workflow that you've been doing through the base, through the ring, everything like that. We're just creating an open shape. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try our best to create a center point. So we're going to open up one of our side views. We're going to turn off smooth shading. And we're going to go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. This is going to be dragged on the outside. You just want to match it up as best you can to the inside. This is going to give us that centered outer edge loop. If you look at this fan and the way it's shaped, it does have a bit of a divot slash bevel in the center. So this is going to be something we have to deal with. But for now, we're just trying to get the basic general shape. So we're going to go Mesh Tools. We're going to go Offset Edge Loop. I'm going to drag this out. I'd say to right about there. This is going to be one of the rare cases where you want to mirror this on the inside. And so the best way to do this is just kind of look and see where you're dragging it in one of your other viewports. And you can see how you can kind of see it in the lower viewport. Just try to match that up as best as possible. Because in the end, this is a very thin piece that when it's pressed or manufactured, it's getting pulled however it's getting pulled. So the entire piece of metal is being deformed, and it's not necessarily going to be bulbous on the outside, but flat on the inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit R. We're going to scale this out. Just kind of get that body look, that fan body look. When you scale it out like that, you're going to get that nice bulbous look to it. And this is really going to give you that shape to start working off of. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on this outer ring, the part that actually connects to the fan grate itself. So we're going to do a cylinder the same way we've been doing this. This is a lot of repetition work at this point, so don't be alarmed. We're going to rotate that 90 degrees in the X and then just scale it out a bit. This is a relatively thin piece of metal, so when it comes down to it, you want to make sure that you're trying to match that as best as possible. And then we're going to just extrude this inwards. And this is kind of a thicker piece. So we'll just extrude that. And then G to do it one more time. Pull it in. But it's this repetition that's going to kind of help you really learn these tools. Get better at them. I made that a little close, but that's okay. Sometimes, depending on how close it is, you won't even need to adjust your tolerance, but I do. So here's our ring. What we're going to do is kind of push this in the center. And then we're going to just try to best align that. And I'm going to smooth it just so I can really get it right where I want it. I think that's about right. Yeah. So you may notice, because this has such a high resolution to it versus this, they're going to look like they offset a bit. But when you smooth either of these, they're going to line up just fine. We may have made this one a little bit too big, but we're going to adjust that here. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this outer ring. We're going to scale the outer ring in a little bit just to kind of create a bevel. And we're going to just continue with the way that this is actually structured. So we're going to just try to refine that as best as possible. Okay. And so what you'll notice too is this kind of pushes out a bit. So we're going to take this and pull the face out a bit just to kind of create that shape. Smooth it just to make sure that we're still matching up, and it's going to shrink a bit because we don't have any supporting edge loops, but otherwise it's following the shape we need it to. So we're okay so far. All right, so there we have the face of the fan. And the cool thing about this is we've created this face, and the nice thing is the back of this fan uses the same part. So we're just gonna copy this and put it in the back. So what we're gonna do is gonna go to Modify, Freeze Transformations, and then do Control D. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna scale it -1 in the Z direction. That's gonna flip the object, and then you can just cap the back of the fan. So there we have it. There's the back and there's the front. So to start this next part, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go against what would be common knowledge. You would think that you would model the grate, but I'm going to show you a way that I like to do because it gives me a good reference point on how to actually build this. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this little center puck, and that's going to be really easy. We're going to do the same thing. We'll pull, rotate, and then we're going to just pull this out. So what we're going to do is we're going to try our best to get this fully centered. Should be right about there, I'm thinking. I'm hoping. And you can test this really quickly by just scaling it, and you can see it doesn't line up at all. So what we're going to do is just do that, That's pretty good. Okay, so we've got our little puck. We're going to model this in real quick. And then what we're going to do is we are going to quad this one, because this is a solid face. So we're going to go extrude, pull this in, delete those faces, edge, and we're going to select those edges, and we're going to bridge. Add a division, and then merge these two vertexes, and the same here. And then we're going to go into wireframe and just make sure that these are actually lining up where they need to be. That is the simplest way that you can actually quad one of these out. And what I want to do is show you another way that I'd like to do this. So an easier way to do this, so you don't have to just continuously bridge all the time, is you can select these interior faces. You can go to Edit Mesh. You can duplicate. You can click your world toggle, and you can pull this back. Okay, so when you're done with that, you'll notice you have this black dot. Easiest way to fix that real quick is just go to Modify. You can center your pivot, and you can just rotate this face. You can also just type it in up here, rotate 180. There we go. And then what I like to do is just make sure it's lined up, which right now it's not looking like it is. It's not. Just drag it in, line it up, select both of these, go to Mesh, Combine. So now that these are linked up, what you're going to do is you're just going to go to Vertex. You're going to select all of these vertex. Not these ones in the middle, though. And then just make sure you didn't select any on the other side. You can see we did. We'll just deselect those, and we're going to merge. And go as far as our threshold likes or lets us without going and pulling into the center. And then you'll see that these are connected. That is just another way of doing this. You don't have to do it that way. You can continue to do it the other way. So what we're going to do, now looking at this, this is kind of like bubbled. So we're going to select these interior faces here. And we're going to actually scale them out a bit. And just pull it. Just to give that bubble look. And then the other thing is, if you ever look at a fan, this is usually just a piece of metal that was pressed. So it's usually hollow on the other side. So we're going to select all those faces. We're going to scale this guy out. And then we're just going to extrude it inwards. And then I'm thinking that this puck is actually a little bit too thick. So I'm just going to adjust this a minute. Yeah, so that's probably more like it. So now we just need to figure out where this actually sits on the fan. Most fans, they don't concur, or they don't like curve out all the way, but they do have somewhat of a distance to it. So we'll probably put it right about there. That should give us kind of what we're looking for, and this is where we're going to actually be able to really dig into what we're doing here. Okay, so one of the more complicated parts of this is going to be the actual grate itself. If you're doing a gaming model, you would probably just use a texture to make that look see-through. It would be less to do with geometry-wise, and you wouldn't have to really stress about it. But since we're doing a hard surface model that we're actually going to use in like a rendered scene, we want to have as much detail as possible. So when you're looking at this, you can see these spokes, which these are the main support spokes. They come out straight, and then they kind of curve in. So what I'm going to do is we're going to actually create this spoke across. We're going to create this one right here. We're going to do that from our top-down view. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our top-down view. And then I'm going to select this. I'm going to create a layer. We're going to call that layer fan_base. You have to use the underscore here because Maya requires it. It's dumb. Don't ask me why. And then turn off the visibility. That way we can hide it. So you would think that the easiest way to do this would be to create a cylinder and extrude it, extrude it, extrude it. That's just a waste of time. Don't do that. This is going to be kind of the better way to do that. We're going to go to our curves. You're going to select your curve, your EP curve tool. We're going to click, and then we're going to start kind of curving in. And boom. That should give us what we want. You're going to enter to apply. Then we're going to pull this up here. And we're going to center that. Because this is the only one that's actually centered. Okay. So looking at that, looks pretty good. The only issue is that we can't really see how these attach. Usually it's by some sort of like weird little weld. So we're not going to worry too much about that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to right click it. I'm going to hit Control Vertex. And I'm just going to try to cinch this up against the model a little bit better. It doesn't have to be perfect. But there we go. So that's cinched up against the model. I hit Object Mode. And you have your EP curve. I'm going to go in here and just kind of modify these a little bit because a fan has like a natural like kind of bow to it. And we want to maintain that bow. It's also looking like we have a little bit too much of a sharp edge here. So we're going to pull this curve in and just give that a little bit more of a rounded nub. So to me, that seems like it should be fine. So now we're going to go back to our polygon menu. You're going to see this tool up here. This is your sweep mesh tool. This replaced extrude along curve a long time ago because extrude along curve never worked in Maya very well. So we're going to create a sweep mesh. When you create it, you're going to notice it's huge. It's way too big. It doesn't make any sense. All you need to do is pull it down a bit. We're going to change this to about 9 sides. We might go up to 10 sides just to kind of adjust the resolution. I just want it to be a little bit higher resolution than it actually is. We're going to pull the scale profile down. And so probably right about there is about where we want to be. Maybe a little bit smaller. We'll call it right there. So about 0.137 is where we want to be. You'll notice that it curves. However, it fails right here. This is a problem because when you smooth this, it's actually going to just average that and it's not going to function properly. You're not going to get this nice actual like dip into the model. So the way we fix that is we go down to interpolation. We fix the precision. This is going to increase the resolution, but we just want to get it to a point where it's about right. And that's looking pretty good. And when you click on the mesh itself, you'll see that we just increased the resolution a little bit. And when you smooth it, you get that nice flow. Okay. So with that said, that's done. Sweep mesh is good to go. The problem is when you go and look at this, there is still a curve in here. And this curve is applied to this model. Usually, you can just hit delete, and it's totally fine. Sometimes you cannot. Sometimes you need to actually select them both, go to Edit, Delete by Type, and History to wipe and break the link between them. That's not always the case, but it does happen sometimes. Okay, so we've got our fan pin, or our first grate pin. And the easiest way to kind of duplicate this across is we're just going to go up here. We're going to hit Control D. We're going to reopen our channel box, and we're going to scale it. Because now we have 2 of them. And so here's another issue. You'll notice that when you hit W, E, R, any of your hotkeys to move things, you're not seeing your controller. Your gizmo's down here. It doesn't make sense as to why it's down there. So what you want to do is you want to go to Modify, Center Pivot. This is going to center the pivot on the object and make sure that you're working in the same space. But now you'll see we have 2 objects. We're going to scale in the X direction, -1. And just bring that right about there. So now if we look at it, we've got our 2 little our two little grates. We'll pull that out a little bit. So there's a couple of ways that you can duplicate these to get these offset X patterns. One of the ways I just like to do it, and it's kind of just the easiest way, is you can do a radial duplicate. I just feel like it takes more time to figure out like what direction you're actually moving it. I just like to go, I'll do an edit, group, and then I will do a modify and center pivot, and that'll center it right in the middle of the model. Sometimes it's not super accurate and you just need to drag it. And what I'm doing is I'm holding D, and that allows you to drag your manipulator and put it to where you need it to be, your gizmo. And we can see that we're kind of off center somewhere, so we'll have to figure out why that's the case. But now you have it in the middle. So if you look at this, when I rotate this, it rotates perfectly in the center. So all I'm going to do is do Control D, and we're going to rotate to about right there. Just try to match that up with that actual line. You can drag out more for a little bit more precision. Just trying to match that right about in the center actually of this. Right about there. And then Control D. And the same thing. And there we have our fan grate. The other thing is just going to be creating a couple toruses around the outside of this. And we can turn our base back on, so we've got our fan there again. So we're going to just go here. We're going to create a torus. We're going to pull this up. And these are just primitives. We're just working with some primitives here. We're going to, first of all, rotate this about 90 degrees in the X. We're going to scale it. And then you notice it's still too big. So what we're going to do, we're going to adjust the section radius. We're going to change this to about 0.2. And we're going to have to go a little bit lower than that. So what we're going to do is 0.05. So it looks like 0.03 is going to be kind of our sweet spot. It's going to be right about where we are there. I'm going to, just to be safe, I'm going to go to about 4. 4 seems like it's going to be about as thick as we need it to be. And then we're going to center this as best as possible as well. Okay. So this is going to be our first little ring. And we're not going to focus on attaching these just yet. We will do that in a later tutorial, but right now we're just blocking out the model. And you notice we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these. So we're going to just do Control D. We're going to scale it out. So you may notice that when you scale that and it pulls out like that, it's going to actually increase the size of the torus as well. So working this way is just not going to work. It's best to just create a new one and then go from there. So what we'll do is we'll just continue creating toruses, move it up, move it out, rotate 90. And you can do all of this control right through here, because unfortunately when you place the model and it's said and done, you can't adjust these anymore. So we're going to make sure that we go to polytorus. We're going to section radius to about 0.4. What we decide we were working with. We're going to scale it. We're going to place it. We want to make sure that's as centered as possible. And then just scale it to where it needs to be. Which is going to be right about there. And then we're going to pull this down to about 0.3. Trying to see whether or not... Yeah. So we'll call that good at about 0.25. It should be about 0.28. We'll call that good at 0.28. So that's going to be our secondary ring. And then from here, create another torus, pull it up 90 degrees. Rotate it. Or pull it out. And then center. I'm going to scale that, and then we're going to change this again to 0.3, enter, scale that in a bit to kind of create that uniform, and then we're going to go down again to about 27. Probably 26, actually. It looks like we're going to go down in about increments of 2. So 26 should give us that nice radius that we're looking for. It still looks a tad bit too big, so we're going to go down to about 24. The nice thing is we can take these and we can duplicate them back when we build the back, so really this is just a one step. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we got 2 more we need to make. I'm going to follow the same process. I'm guessing about 0.22. Okay, I'm going to pull this in. This is going to be our 4th ring. Got a good setup there. And then just scale it in a tad bit. And I think we're going to drop this one about 0.20. Just to kind of match up with everything else. Okay, so if we look at this, looking pretty good. Keep in mind, these are not going to be immediately flush with this. We're just trying to make this look as decent as possible. We are going to eventually like pull them in. And then we got one more to do. So we'll create our last torus. And change this to about 0.18, I'm thinking. 0.18, sorry. And just scale it. This one does not touch fully the edge, but it gets pretty close. So right about there is where we're going to be. And I think I'm going to actually drop that to about 16. That should be about right. So we have maintained. We have our nice fan grate. And we're matching the reference almost perfectly. So we're going to pull this puck out a little bit because I just don't like how it's not sitting flush. And we're just going to move these in a little bit. Because in real life, these would be welded to these bars. And then that's going to give us more of that curvature that we're looking for. So one thing to make sure you're saving. Always save your work. Super important. I have lost many things because of not saving my work, so make sure you're doing that. Now we need to look at the back of the fan. The back of the fan is very different. It only has 3 rings, so we're only going to copy over 3 rings. We're going to duplicate over these guys because we do need these again, and they're in the same pattern, so it's a real easy thing to do. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to select these 3 groups that we have over here in our outliner. We're going to go Edit, Ungroup, and then Edit, Group. We're basically just deleting all those groups and regrouping them. You're going to do we're going to go Modify, Center Pivot, Control D, scale it, -1 in the Z, pull it back, and we're just going to line it up as best as we need right there. So we're pretty good there. Okay, and then the back only has 3 of them, but the back also has this, if you look at it, the back also has this little control plate. So we have this to work with now. This is going to be another cylinder. We can get away with reusing the front puck. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Control D, -1 in the Z, pull it back, and this will save us from having to re-quad this. We're going to scale it out, and we're going to keep looking at that reference. So this one has a much more intense interior bevel. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all these faces, tab, drag. I'm going to pull that bevel in. I'm going to pull this out. That way we've got what we're looking for. The difference here is actually going to be the back here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do tab and drag all of our faces. And then select all of these faces. We're going to delete them because this is its own shape. So we're going to select the entire interior ring. We're going to extrude that in, pull it in, and then we're going to bridge this because we just need to make sure that we're actually working with geometry that makes sense to us and we're not having to like recoup and make a weird mesh that doesn't make any sense. So we're going to bridge that real quick, add an extra division. Merge these, merge those, and then we're going to scale these out just to match up with the original as best as we can. Cool. All right. So there we go. We have our little back control panel here. I think it needs to be a little bit bigger. If we look at this, yeah, that's probably about right. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take these outer 3 rings. these three right here. Control D. We're going to pull them back. And then that gets scaled up a little bit. But we're going to uniformly scale them, so we don't really need to worry about them. And plus, you're not going to really worry about the thickness back here. And then we want to just make sure we're matching that as best as we can. We're kind of not. We need to go a little bit bigger. Probably to about right there. Yeah, that looks about right. We're just going to merge those in as best as we can. There we go. Okay, so we have our front and our back of our fan. And that is how you create the fan grate. Okay, so the next part we're going to do is, if you look in here, you can see this black object. This black object is the motor. It's what controls the fan. It's what makes it go spinny spin. Looking at pictures, we don't really have a good estimation of what it looks like, aside from a cylinder with a base that comes out and connects to the actual blade itself. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to create a cylinder, pull it up, rotate in the X 90 degrees, and make sure it's centered with everything. And then just scale it up. And it should match up with that object in the back, which is it's going to be the little control panel. So we'll look at this, pull it back, make sure it's kind of meshing up with it. Because this is like a piece that connects to another piece. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into our side view, and I'm just going to go vertex. I'm going to pull these vertexes back instead of scaling it. I just don't want to deal with having to scale it. So it looks like it comes about midway point. If we look at our reference here, actually it doesn't even come midway. It comes just a little bit in. But this back point does stick out. So we're seeing here that it does actually, the fan sticks out quite a bit. So we're going to have to adjust that. So we're going to pull, let's do this. We're going to pull these objects out. And then the easiest way to do this is going to be to, we're going to delete those and we're going to adjust this one. So we're going to go in here and we're going to pull this out. So we're going to look at our vertex here. Pull. And just pull, because this does actually have quite the bevel to it. We're just going to try to make that look as uniform as possible, which right now it's not. Okay. Cool. So we have that. That's good. It now is a lot more bulbous, and it kind of matches more with this, the way this was working. There is a little bit of a kind of push. Let's see. Just want to make sure that's looking okay. Yeah, that looks fine. Okay, so what we're going to do is now pull this out. Just make sure this is looking better than what we had before. And it's already getting that shape much nicer. I didn't realize it stuck out that much. So what you can do is you can just delete these guys up front, and we'll do the same thing. We'll just mirror it across and readjust it real quick. All right, so one thing I forgot to mention here. Let's just move our concept out of the way. So when you create a sweep mesh, there's an issue that sweep meshes have, and they don't cap themselves. So if we go show, isolate view selected, if you look at the sweep mesh, you can tell it's not capped. You can cap them. It's going to be a default just kind of flat cap, and it's not going to look the best. Or you can just real quickly quad them off. And that's what I like to do. So we're going to select these two edges. We're going to just bridge it real quick. And then you can select these two edges and bridge, and it creates a little trapezoid-like shape. And then you're good to go there. Do the same thing over here. Just creates a nice solid object. You don't have to do this necessarily. It's just something I like to practice, because then you don't have to deal with random holes in your mesh. especially if you plan on like 3D printing. I don't know why you would 3D print this, but it's always an option. Okay, cool. So there we have it. That's created. We're going to go ahead and Control D. Going to scale again in the X direction. That should be relatively centered. We just want to make sure it's looking all right on the back end. And it should be fine. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so I'm going to select those two. I'm going to go Mesh, Combine. It's going to center them. And you can either do Combine or you can do Merge, or you can do Group. Doesn't really matter. Both accomplish the same thing. Okay, so Edit. Okay, so I'm going to do Control D. We're going to rotate. The same concept. We're just trying to center it within that area. Control D one more time. And we're going to center it right here. Okay, so we have our new prongs for the fan mesh itself. So we're going to select all of these. And then we're going to do a mesh, combine. That's just going to help kind of keep this centered. And then we're just going to scale it in the Z, -1, pull it forward. And we're going to readjust our mesh based around this. So we're going to do that. I'm going to pull all these rings forward. And then we're going to end up pulling some of these back because it creates that nice curved look. Okay. Much better. Okay. Except I didn't duplicate that. Control D. 1. There. Just make sure it duplicated. Okay. Okay, that's better. So we have our fan body. We're going to go back to the motor now. Sometimes when you're modeling, you will notice that you have some strange issues. And sometimes you'll notice that maybe your scaling is off. And that's okay. You can adjust it. It's never anything too crazy. We're going to pull this guy in. And then this comes out a bit. And then I can only assume that there's like a rod that comes directly out of it. And this is where the fan mounts to. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to go Show, Isolate View Selected. So we're going to look at this. We are going to quad this out real quick. We want to make sure that this is still following the same pattern that we've been following with all of our other geometry. And bridge and division. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to scale these out just to try to maintain this shape as best as possible. And just merge those real quick. And then the back we're going to do the same thing for. Just make sure you don't select any faces you don't want to delete, because if you do, you'll cause a mess later on. Okay, edge. Extrude, pull this in, and we'll just quad it real quick. And really, if you want to just do this the easiest way, you can just select, and then bridge. And then add a division. There's simple ways of doing it. I'm just a little bit more tedious when I model, so it's really just up to you. Okay, cool. All right, so we have it. That's our little motor. Show, Isolate View Selected. Okay, so we have our little motor mount. We're good there. Now we need to make the fan blade, which is arguably going to be one of the weirder shapes in this model, especially because of the weird beveling that they've done. So now, let's go ahead and create that. So now we're going to focus on creating the blade. So we're going to do another cylinder, pull this up, and this is going to be a more complicated shape. So we're going to really work on this outside before we put it into the fan itself. I'm going to rotate -90. We do want to center this as best as we can. And then just pull this back. So we're going to kind of create the main puck. Scale this in. Because the fan is pressed shape, so it's a piece of metal that was pressed. But at the same time, it's also like hollow. Aside from the blades that extrude off the back. Okay. So we're going to quad this. Easiest way, again, is just to pull this in, delete all those faces, select all, and deselect these, and then bridge. You may ask why this is important. This is just a workflow that is kind of required for most engines. It helps reduce the amount of n-gons that you have in your scene, and it helps really kind of create just a cleaner object. It isn't necessarily required. You can go through this entire tutorial without doing this. However, it's a good state of mind to get into that you're working in quads and you want to stay working in quads. So it's just something I recommend you focus on. So we're going to go ahead and pre-do this. We're going to scale this out, and we're going to punch this in. This should be a thin portion of this model, so we're not really worried about it. What we are worried about, though, is the fins. So we have 4 fins. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop, and we're going to insert an edge loop right back here. We're going to do one right here, just to give a little bit of separation from that edge. And then we're going to work in this in quadrants. So we're going to take this, we're going to delete, we're going to go face, make sure you Q escape to get out of that old tool. We're going to delete that, and we're going to delete that. This is going to be our fan blade, one quadrant of our fan blade. Thankfully, it's a 4-bladed fan, so we don't really have anything to stress about. We're going to take these edges, and we're going to extrude them out. And you're going to scale them in to create that thin blade. And then we're going to keep scaling out. You notice it's just getting wider and wider. That's something we're going to just adjust. We're not going to stress too much about it. But there's our blade. So you look at this and you realize it doesn't look anything like those blades. We're going to work on that now. So we're going to look at our concept here, or our reference image. And we've got a nice view of what the blades actually look like. So this is what we want to kind of match. I'm going to pull this over to my other monitor. You can do whatever you need to, but this is just how I work generally. So looking at this, it's got a curve at the bottom. So we're going to pull these up. And then we're going to pull this guy out. And then up at the top, it curves inwards. So we're going to pull. We're just going to kind of shift this entire thing inwards, rotate it a little bit. And it's got a really steep curve to it, so it's quite a weird fan blade actually. And then most fans, if you look at them, the blades themselves are quite curved. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all of these verts. We're just going to try to shape this as best as we can. So most of them on this fan, it looks like they curve inward. So they kind of do this notion. And then what we're going to do is we're going to slightly pull these verts back to create a curve. And we're going to just feed that curve throughout. And keep in mind, this won't be perfect yet. We are still technically blocking this model out. And then what we want to do is just kind of refine that edge as much as possible. We're going to leave all that because that doesn't really matter. And then mesh tools, we're going to add some extra support right here and right here with an insert edge loop tool. This is just going to give us that nice curve that you're seeing. That way we kind of have a good view of what we're doing. And if we smooth that, we've got this nice smooth looking fan blade. So here's where this gets a little bit more complicated because we need more of a gap here. So between where the blades connect on the fan, there needs to be a bit of a gap, and we don't have that created currently. So what we're going to need to do is basically artificially create that gap. So we're going to take these faces, we're going to delete these. we're going to take this. Tools, insert edge loop. Nope. We're going to take this and we're going to bridge this real quick. Just a single bridge across. No big deal. So what we could do is we could take these and drag these in. That would just create another triangle. But what we can do is we can take this, pull this. That eliminates any triangles. And it gives us that gap that we were looking for. It'll pull this up a little bit, but you can just pull it back down. Just kind of readjust it as best you can. You can look at this from the front and just decide if that's actually functioning the way you want it to or not. That's currently not. There we go. All right. So that gives us a quad, a weird quad, but it's a quad. And we can now actually adjust this wherever we need to. So we can actually pull this in closer, which is kind of what we want. So we're going to put this right about there. That's going to give us what we want. We do need to pull it up a little bit because we did just change the shape. But again, this is kind of like a pressed piece, so you're not really going to notice it all that much. And the only thing I want to do here is just kind of clean up this geometry a little bit. Just make sure it's looking clean. All right, so we have one fan blade out of 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a duplicate special. So we're going to go up here, we're going to go edit, duplicate special. And this is going to give you the options to duplicate in a rotary fashion. So we're going to take the fan blade. We're staying on copy. We're staying on parent. And then from here, we're going to do 90 degrees. And this should be along the x-axis and hit apply. That's going to be a perfect copy across. But you're also going to notice that it does screw this up. So we are going to have to redo this center face, which sucks, but isn't the end of the world. We're going to take all of these. We're going to go to mesh, combine. You're going to select the face. You're going to tab, drag, just to select all these front faces and delete them. We're going to do the same with the back. Tab, just delete them. And I think I got them all. I'm missing a couple. Delete. Okay. The other thing you want to make sure is that these actually merged. Sometimes they don't. And in this case, they didn't. So we're going to just go through with the vertex. We're going to merge. Relatively easy to just run through the model real quick. Select all these and just merge them together. That way you know you're getting a clean seam. And then you can smooth to check whether or not you've got everything linked up properly. Okay, so it looks like we're good. So we're going to select these edges. We're going to extrude it in. Oh, and we don't. So we missed one. And you can usually tell when you try to extrude because it's going to try to do some weird stuff. So we'll extrude. So we've got nothing weird going on there. Pull that in, and then we'll Q escape, and we'll keep this selected. I'm going to select these two faces, or these two edges. We're going to bridge again, division, and we're just going to drag these across and get them linked up. And this is arguably one of the more complicated pieces of this entire build. If not the most complicated, just because it's an odd shape to work with. So don't worry if you're not getting this on the first try. Just watch it a couple of times and you'll get there. Okay, so there we have it. We have our fan blades. So one thing we're going to do is if we look at this, you can tell there's a little center divot there. So we're going to go face, select, tab. Just drag and select all of these. We're going to extrude. We're going to pull this in this way. So we're going to pull that in. There's a little bit of a divot. We're going to extrude that out. And then there's another one. So we're just going to kind of build upon this. Pull that in. And then pull this through. doesn't have to go all the way through. It's just, again, for like the detailing. And we're going to scale this down. We're going to move this back in here. And then in theory, this should all just line up flawlessly. There we go. We have our fan. It's inside. It's about. We're going to decide. Let's look at the concept here. Reference. The fan blade sits right in the middle. So, make sure it sits right in the middle here. It's right about there. Cool. And there's our fan blade. Now the rest of the things we have to do is just model a couple little doodads here and there. So the next part we need to do is we're going to go through and we're going to model these little knobs. They're pretty basic. And then from there we've blocked out our entire model and we're ready to go. We're going to wait on the little detail portions, which would be the button and the cable. Those are going to be last because they're small parts that are not going to require as much work as, say, the body of the fan. So let's go ahead and start on the knobs. Okay, so the knobs themselves are going to be a pretty simple object. We're going to do the same thing. This time we're going to rotate in the Z, -90. Not -9, -90. We're going to focus. All right, so same thing. I know this gets annoying. Again, this is why I save these. I have my own library of pre-built quadded out items, especially primitives like this, just because I'm so tired of like making these all the time. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm not using that library because you guys don't have access to that library. So we're going to deselect these edges. We're going to bridge. Oh, I missed one. I'm going to bridge, add a division. And you can see what happens when you bridge without actually deselecting some of these. It just kind of caps it, and that's not what you want. Vertex, vertex. Just drag these out. I'm going to merge that, and we're going to merge that. Okay. So we have our quadded out. And if you want to, honestly, at this point, just Control D that, and then just keep one down here. It's good to have, good to keep. So we're going to take this. Let's just kind of pre-scale it, and then move it in here. Because we're going to work with this within 2 parts. So firstly, we can tell that we've got a little bit of a problem here. So the way this works, these are creating an unnecessary curve. So what we need to do is just kind of straighten them out a little bit, just to get that as straight as possible. We may have to do some more adjustment there in the future, but that's okay. And then we're going to pull this back in. So we're going to show, isolate view selected. We're going to select these faces here. And then we're going to just extrude this out. This is going to be like a little center rod. We're going to do another extrusion. We're going to pull this out. And we're going to just take this edge and we're going to extrude this out. Okay, show. We're going to extrude that out just a little bit. We're going to go show, isolate, view selected. All right, so we noticed that we pulled that out a little bit too far. We're just going to select these faces, drag it in just a tad bit so it matches up with that. And then from here, we're going to create this knob. So if you look at these knobs, they're usually kind of hollow. What we're going to do is deselect this out. So we're going to focus on this. You can hit F to focus. I'm going to drag around, select everything there, and then we're going to extrude this again. And this is where we're going to actually kind of build this out. So we're going to extrude one more time, and then we're going to grab this. We're going to pull this out. We're going to hit W, pull it back, extrude it again, W, just pull it back. And then from here, we're going to go Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. We're going to grab an edge loop and just drag it in here. Control Z. We're going to go Face, and double click and select all these. Scale that, and then pull this in. And that's going to kind of create that hollow knob. And then the last thing is just to tab and drag and select these. And then we'll just extrude them out one time. Creates that. Got that nice little knob going on. I think it needs a little bit of adjustment though. Made it come out a little too far. That's better. I like that much more. Okay, so we have that. We can just Control D. And we're going to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. Scale it in the X, -1. And then just drag it over. And there we have it. So again, we're blocking this out. That's not going to really matter. We're going to really focus on detailing that later. And then the last thing is this little ring object, which I'm not entirely sure what that is right now, but it looks like it's some sort of stopper just to keep the fan from rotating too far. It is actually part of the fan's body. But I think what we'll do is we'll just copy this. We will scale this. And we're just going to recreate that real quick. Scale. That's weird. Okay. I'm going to just pull this in, delete it, edge. This is where having those advanced primitives copied kind of helps a lot. And I recommend creating your own library of advanced primitives because it does change a lot. So we're going to copy this. We're going to go over here. Focus. And we're going to scale this. Just try to match this up because this seems to be something that like goes through this. Okay. And it's a little, it's actually pretty thin. So we're going to just add a little bit of thickness to it. And then it comes out. So we're going to extrude this. Extrude it one more time. And I'm thinking the band might be a little too thick. So we'll adjust that real quick. And then this comes out. Goes in this direction. And it just kind of holds right there. And I am seeing here that it looks like our scaling isn't necessarily 100% proper. So as long as we have these objects modeled out, we'll come back and fix that. But I do want to fix this because I think it's too thick. So we're just going to come into our side view here, select it all, we'll thin it a little bit. Do the same thing here. And then we'll just move this, center it better. And then there we go. Now we have that little nib right there. So same thing. We're going to freeze it. Control D. And then X, we're going to do -1. Scale this out right there. Cool. So we have our little nubs. We're going to delete this because we don't really need this anymore. And that is our blocked out fan. Again, later in the tutorial, we're going to worry more about the power switch and the power cable. Those aren't necessarily required right now for the body. The next part of this tutorial, we're going to really focus on the body itself. We're going to make sure that we get this pattern duplicated across and actually really mold it and mesh it. And we're going to make sure that it's all linked up and good to go, and we have those nice holes going through because a lot of the geometry on this actually relies on those holes. If you look at the way they built this, the screws that hold this fan together go right through the fan. That's where we'll also add some of the details like the bolts that would hold this together and anything else that's just like a minor detail that we're not really super stressed about right now. So make sure you save your scene, close your file, take a break, and then I'll see you in the next tutorial video.